Hi! For this video, what we are going to do is we are going to solve a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. Regardless of which form you are going to use for solving, whether you're using factoring or whether you're using the quadratic formula, you do need to get it in standard form first, where it's in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So we want to make sure that everything is on one side. So let's go ahead and do that. When we do that, we end up with x squared minus 6x minus 13 equals 0. Remember that whenever I take something from one side to the other side, anytime it changes sides, it changes signs. And then what we are going to do is we are going to use the quadratic formula. This one will not factor because there are no numbers that multiply together to give me negative 13. The only thing I can multiply together to get negative 13 is negative 13 and 1. And if I add negative 13 and 1 or positive 13 and negative 1, I can't get negative 6. So that tells me that this is not factorable. So we have to use the quadratic formula, and the quadratic formula, you're simply just plugging in your values. It is a complicated formula, but once you use it a couple times, it's not so bad. So you have negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So basically what you're going to do is whatever number is in front of your x squared term is always going to go in for each of your a terms. Whatever value is in front of just your plain x term is going to go in for your b terms. And then whatever number is your constant is going to go in where you have the c. So the c is the only one that you only have to replace once. So when you're looking at this, basically what you would do is a is this number in front of x squared. In this case, it's just a 1. B is the number in front of the negatives, or in front of x, so I would take this sign and all, so I would plug in negative 6. And then c is my last term, and I would make sure that I plugged in that sign as well. So all you're doing is taking and replacing the values in the equation with the value that is in your equation. So we have x equals negative 6. So really I could have just written positive 6, but if I go directly to 6, you won't know where that came from. So it's always the opposite sign. And then you would do this square root, negative 6 squared minus 4 times my a term, which is 1, times my c term, which is negative 13, all divided by 2 times my first term, which is 1. So when I'm plugging this into my calculator, I never would try, especially because most of the time you're going to be looking for an exact answer rather than an approximate answer, because dealing with exact answers is better. You'll end up with something that is more precise. So because of that, I never plug in the entire quadratic formula into my calculator, and I know that there are calculators that have the quadratic formula programmed into them. The problem with those is it's only going to give you an approximate solution and not an exact solution. So if you are looking for an exact solution, what you would do is the part that I circled here, you would put it in exactly like that into your calculator. So for this, we end up with positive 6 on the outside. When I plug this into here, negative 6 squared gives me positive 36. And then negative 4 times negative 13 would also give me a positive. And when I add 36 plus 42, because negative 4 times negative 13 is, 52, I end up with 88. So my calculator would give me an output of 88 for this whole value. Okay. The biggest thing to keep in mind is that the whole thing is over the 2 in the bottom. You can't just put it under part of it. It has to be for the whole thing. Since 88 is not a perfect square, what we have to do is simplify this. So some people like to do a factor tree. So for example, I could break this down into 4 times 22. And then 4 breaks down into 2 times 2, and 22 breaks down into 2 times 11. Because we're looking for repeating factors, any repeating factors, so the 2 and the 2 repeat, would go on the outside. So we would put 6 plus or minus 2 would go on the outside. And then whatever doesn't repeat, their product would go underneath. So since 2 and 11, these two don't have another pair to go with them, we would leave the 22 because 2 times 11 is 22 underneath the denominator. And then we still have to have the 2 here. This is still not simplified. The way that we can simplify that is because both 6 and 2 are divisible by 2. I can reduce this. So the exact answer for this would be 3 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 22. So if I were to separate this out, this is really saying I have 3 minus 2 square root 22 is one of my solutions, and 3 plus, sorry, I forgot to simplify that too. Let me go back. This, I have to reduce both of them. Since the 2 goes into the 6 3 times and these 2's cancel each other out, that's why I shouldn't have had that there. I apologize. So with this, this is what is known as an exact solution, because the square root of 22, there's no whole number that goes into there, so this is the exact solution. So if you're looking for an exact solution and you need it in set notation, you would write it like this. This would be an exact solution not written in set notation. And then an approximate solution would be just plugging both of those into your calculator, and I already did that. So if you wanted an approximate solution, you would just plug this directly into your calculator. When I plug in the minus, the 3 minus the square root of 22, I get negative 1.69042. And then when I plug in the other one, I get the 3 plus the square root of 22, I get 7.69042. So these would be approximate solutions. So it's just depending upon what you are asked for. If it asks for a decimal approximation, you would just simply plug it into your calculator. If it asks for an exact value, you would leave it in terms of square roots. For checking this, because it is so complicated and you can't do it on its own, I would just take and plug this into your calculator and make sure that it works. So to show you how to do that, because it's x squared minus 6x times 13, you basically, let me just write the original equation since we can't see what we're plugging into. We're going to see if I plug my values in for x, if I plug in 3 minus the square root of 22 squared minus 6 times 3 minus square root 22, does this equal 13? So this is how we would check. For the other, we would just do the same thing, but we would do 3 plus the square root of 22. There are a lot of different options that you have. I'm just going to show you in general how to plug this into your calculator. I would just plug the entire left-hand side directly in as it looks. So we would just type in parentheses and make sure that wherever I have a parentheses that you put it in parentheses, the 3 minus the square root of 22. And then you would just arrow to get out from underneath the radical, close the parenthesis and do the squared. And then you can just type in exactly the minus 6 parentheses 3 minus the square root of 22, and I would just plug it all in at once, because if you try to do it in pieces, it's very possible that you're going to mess up. And if I hit enter, notice that does give me 13, so we know that that works. I'm just going to grab this one so I don't have to retype everything, and the only thing that I'm going to change is, remember, the second solution, instead of being 3 minus the square root of 22, is 3 plus the square root of 22, so I have to change both of them. And typically it's much faster, it's just because I'm trying to record and everything at the same time, it slows it down. Notice that this also gives us 13, so we can see that both of these work. So just simply plug this into your calculator. It's always, always, always important to check your work, because we are human and we do tend to make mistakes. So if you check your work anytime you have equations, you should never get the problem wrong. As always, thanks for watching. If there is anything that you need, any math content that you need, please comment down below if you're on my YouTube channel. If you're on my website, mathandstatshelp.com, make sure that you fill out the contact form and let me know what you need. As always, thanks for watching.